I've been around long enough to notice how folks treat the ones they can't figure out. The quiet ones. The different ones. The ones who don't fit the picture their families had in mind. Most times, people like that get pushed aside, sent off. Forgotten. Written out of the story before they ever had a chance to tell it. I saw it happen once. Out on the prairie. Back in the summer of 1887. The wagon lurched hard over a rut in the road. Isabella gripped the side rail, knuckles white against splintered wood. 3 days of dust behind her. 3 days of silence ahead. The driver hadn't asked her name. Hadn't asked why a young woman sat alone in the back of a freight wagon with nothing but a worn carpet bag and a sealed letter. Gus spat tobacco juice into the dirt and squinted toward the horizon. 40 miles to Cole's place, he said, not turning around. Man lives alone out there. Don't expect much. Isabella said nothing. The Hawthorne estate had disappeared 2 mornings ago. No one had stood at the gate. No one had waved goodbye. Gus glanced back at her once, then looked away quick. "You look like someone," he muttered. "Can't quite place it. Something about the eyes." The wagon rolled on. And somewhere ahead, a man she'd never met was waiting to receive her like a piece of unwanted mail. If this opening has stirred something in you, I'd love to know where you're watching from tonight. And if you've been enjoying these stories without subscribing, I hope you'll consider joining us. It means more than you know. The cabin sat low against the ridge, its sod roof blending into the brown grass like something that had grown there rather than been built. A split-rail corral, a barn with one door hanging crooked, smoke curling thin from a chimney pipe. Gus pulled the wagon to a stop. The horses stamped, shaking dust from their manes. A figure emerged from the barn. Tall, lean. He wiped his hands on his trousers as he walked, leaving dark streaks across the worn fabric. His face was shadowed beneath a battered hat, but Isabella could see the set of his jaw hard, like the land around him. He stopped 10 feet from the wagon. Gus tossed down a canvas sack. "Letters in there. From Hawthorne." The man Daniel Cole, she assumed, caught it without looking away from her. His eyes moved across her face, down to her hands gripping the carpet bag. Back up. No disgust, no pity, nothing she could read. He opened the sack, pulled out the folded paper, broke the wax seal. His eyes scanned the words. His jaw tightened once. Then he tucked the letter into his shirt pocket without comment. "You hungry?" His voice was low, roughened from disuse. Isabella's mouth opened, closed. She had prepared herself for anger, for resentment, for the cold assessment of a man forced to take damaged goods. Not this. "I don't want to impose," she managed. Daniel turned toward the cabin. "Bread's on the table, butter in the crock." He paused at the door, one hand on the frame. "Cabin's yours tonight. I sleep in the barn. I can't take your home." 4 walls and a roof. He didn't turn around. "You need it more than I do." The door swung open. He disappeared inside. Gus clicked his tongue at the horses. "Best get down, miss. I got 20 miles back to Stillwater before dark." Isabella climbed down. Her legs trembled. 3 days of sitting had made them weak. She stood in the dirt yard, watching Gus turn the wagon around. He tipped his hat once. Then the wagon rattled away, growing smaller against the endless brown. The wind picked up. It carried the smell of dry grass and wood smoke and leather. Behind her, the cabin door stood open. Daniel Cole had read her father's letter, the letter that called her a burden, a disgrace, a problem to be solved, and his only question had been whether she was hungry. Why? 3 days passed. Isabella learned the rhythm of the homestead without being taught. The rooster crowed before dawn. Daniel's boots scraped across the porch boards shortly after. The pump at the well groaned and clanked as he filled the water buckets. By the time pale light crept through the oilcloth window, he was already gone out to the cattle, or mending fences, or somewhere she couldn't see. She woke on the 4th morning to silence. No boots, no pump. She pushed back the quilt faded red and cream. Hand-stitched by someone who was no longer here, and swung her feet to the packed dirt floor. The cabin smelled of wood smoke and coffee. A tin cup sat on the table, still warm. He had made coffee for her. Left it without a word. Isabella dressed in the cotton work dress a neighbor had brought 2 days ago. The widow, Mrs. Harlan, had ridden over on a dun mare. A bundle of clothes tied behind her saddle. "Heard Cole got company," she'd said. Her eyes sharp, but not unkind. "These don't fit me no more. Might as well get some use." The dress was too long. Isabella had pinned it at the waist with a strip of rawhide. The boots, also Ms. Harlan's, were stuffed with rags to fit. She stepped onto the porch. The sun had just cleared the ridge, throwing long shadows across the yard. Daniel stood at the well, hauling up a bucket. The rope creaked. Water sloshed over the rim as he set it on the stone lip. He glanced at her, said nothing. Isabella walked toward him. Her legs were steadier now. 3 days of rest and bread and silence had done something, not enough, but something. "I can help," she said. Daniel lifted the bucket. "Don't need help. I want to." He paused, looked at her hands. They were soft, pale, the hands of a woman who had never worked. "All right." He set the bucket down. "Grab the rope. Pull slow. The crank sticks." She wrapped her fingers around the rough hemp. Pulled. The crank resisted, then turned with a grinding squeal. Her shoulders burned by the time the second bucket reached the top. Daniel took it from her. Not bad. He carried both buckets toward the barn. Isabella followed. The horses watched from the corral, 3 of them, their ears pricked forward. The nearest was a bay mare with a white blaze down her face. She tossed her head as Isabella approached the fence. "She don't like strangers," Daniel said. He set the buckets inside the barn and came back, leaning against the split rails. Isabella stood 5 feet from the fence. The mare's nostrils flared. "How do you make her trust you?" Daniel pulled a dried apple from his pocket. "Same way you make anyone trust you. You don't demand it." He held the apple flat on his palm and extended his arm through the rails. The mare hesitated, stepped closer. Her lips brushed his hand, and the apple disappeared. "Your turn." He handed Isabella another apple. "Slow. Don't look her in the eye. Let her come to you." Isabella's heart thudded. The mare was big, bigger than any horse she'd been close to. In Boston, horses pulled carriages. They didn't have names. You didn't touch them. She held out the apple. Her arm trembled. The mare snorted, backed up 2 steps. "Breathe," Daniel said. "She can smell when you're wound tight." Isabella forced air into her lungs. Out. In again. The trembling slowed. The mare's ears swiveled. She took one step forward, then another. Her muzzle stretched toward Isabella's palm, warm breath ghosting across her skin. The apple vanished. Now touch her neck, slow. Isabella reached through the rails. Her fingers brushed coarse hair, the heat of muscle beneath. The mare didn't flinch. Daniel grunted, a small sound. When Isabella looked back, he was nodding once, brief, the way he did everything. "This land's too big to walk," he said. "You need to ride. Her name's Bess." The first lesson happened that afternoon. Daniel saddled the mare and led her to the center of the corral. The saddle was old, the leather cracked, but clean. Left foot in the stirrup, grab the horn, swing your right leg over. It sounded simple. It was not. Isabella got her foot in the stirrup, grabbed the horn, tried to swing up. Her dress tangled. Her arms shook. She slid back down, her boots hitting the dirt with a thud. "Again," Daniel said. She tried, failed, tried again. On the fourth attempt, she made it halfway. Her stomach pressed against the saddle, legs dangling, arms burning. "Push with your left leg." She pushed, swung her right leg over, landed hard in the saddle. The ground looked very far away. "Sit straight. Heels down. Reins loose." Daniel didn't touch her, didn't steady the horse. He stood 3 feet away, arms crossed, watching. Bess shifted. Isabella lurched sideways. "Squeeze with your knees, not your hands." She squeezed. The world steadied. For 10 minutes, she sat in the saddle while Bess stood motionless. Her thighs ached. Her lower back screamed. Sweat trickled down her spine despite the mild air. "Walk her," Daniel said. "Click your tongue. Light pressure with your heels." Isabella clicked. Pressed. Bess stepped forward. The ground moved beneath her. The rhythm was wrong, too much motion. Too many directions at once. Isabella gripped the horn with both hands. "Loosen up. Move with her." She tried. Failed. Tried again. By the time Daniel called a halt, her entire body was shaking. "Get down. Same way you got up. Backwards." She swung her leg over. Her foot missed the stirrup. She slid down Bess's flank and hit the ground on her hands and knees. The dirt was warm, dry. It smelled like dust and horse. Daniel didn't rush over, didn't offer his hand. He stood by the fence, waiting. Isabella pushed herself up, brushed dirt from her borrowed dress. Her palms stung where the ground had scraped them. "Same time tomorrow," Daniel said. He took Bess's reins and led her toward the barn. That night, they sat on the porch. They sat. Daniel had built a small fire in the stone pit near the steps. The smoke kept the insects away. Above them, stars filled the sky, more stars than Isabella had ever seen. So many they seemed to press down with their own weight. She didn't speak. Neither did he. Her hands throbbed. Her legs ached. Tomorrow, she would hurt worse. But sitting there, watching the fire crackle and pop, smelling the sage on the wind, Isabella realized something strange. She had not thought about her father once today. Not once. The wind shifted. Daniel turned his head, listening. "Rider coming," he said quietly. "From the east." Isabella's stomach dropped. No one knew she was here. No one except... The rider emerged from the darkness slowly, a silhouette against the stars, growing larger with each hoofbeat. Daniel stood. His hand moved to his hip, an old habit, Isabella guessed, though he wore no gun. "Evening." The voice was rough, tired. A man's voice. "Evening." Daniel's shoulders didn't relax. The rider stopped at the edge of the firelight. He was old 60, maybe more, with a weathered face and a gray beard stained yellow around the mouth. A battered hat sat crooked on his head. "Name's Jennings, heading to Stillwater. Saw your smoke." He shifted in the saddle. "Don't suppose you got water for my horse?" Daniel studied him for a long moment, then nodded toward the well. "Help yourself." Jennings dismounted with the slow stiffness of a man who had ridden too many miles. He led his horse to the trough, and the animal drank deep, its sides heaving. Isabella's heart slowed. Just a traveler. Not her father. Not yet. "Much obliged." Jennings tipped his hat toward her, then toward Daniel. "I'll be on my way." He mounted again, turned his horse west, and disappeared into the darkness as quietly as he had come. Daniel sat back down. He poked the fire with a stick, sending sparks swirling upward. "Get some sleep," he said finally. "We ride at dawn?" They rode at dawn. Bess moved beneath Isabella with that strange rolling gait she was beginning to understand. Her thighs burned. Her back ached. But she didn't fall. Daniel rode ahead on his gelding. A black horse named Crow. He didn't look back. Didn't slow down. He expected her to keep up. She kept up. The cattle grazed in a wide, shallow valley 3 miles from the cabin. 40 head. Maybe 50. Isabella couldn't count them accurately. They scattered across the brown grass like dark stones, their tails flicking at flies. "We're checking for strays," Daniel said. "Calves wander. Get stuck in draws. Die if you don't find them." He pointed toward a line of scrub brush along a dry creek bed. "You take that side. I'll circle around. Meet back here." Isabella's throat tightened. Alone. He was sending her out alone. "What if I find one? Call out. I'll come." He turned Crow and rode east without another word. Isabella sat frozen for a moment. Then she clicked her tongue and pressed her heels into Bess's sides. The mare started forward. The scrub brush was thicker than it looked. Mesquite and sage tangled together, hiding the ground beneath. Isabella rode slowly, scanning the shadows. Her eyes watered from the dust. Her lips cracked in the dry air. Nothing. No calves. No movement except jackrabbits bolting from the brush. She reached the end of the creek bed and turned back. The sun was higher now, pressing down on her shoulders. Sweat soaked through the cotton dress, pooling in the small of her back. Halfway back, she heard it. A weak, bleeding cry. She stopped, listened. There again, coming from a shallow ravine to her left. Isabella dismounted. Her legs wobbled, but held. She tied Bess's reins to a mesquite branch and picked her way down the slope, rocks sliding beneath her boots. The calf lay wedged between 2 boulders, its legs folded beneath it, Its eyes rolled white. It couldn't have been more than a few weeks old. "Easy," Isabella murmured. Her voice came out steadier than she expected. "Easy now." She knelt beside the calf. Its body was warm, trembling. One of its back legs was caught in a crack between the rocks. She braced her hands against the boulder and pushed. Nothing. The rock didn't budge. The calf bleated again, louder. Isabella cupped her hands around her mouth. "Daniel." Her voice echoed off the ravine walls. She called again and again. Hoofbeats. Crow appeared at the top of the ridge, Daniel swinging down before the horse had fully stopped. He half slid, half ran down the slope. "Legs caught," Isabella said. "Gentle." Daniel didn't answer. He crouched beside the calf, ran his hands along its trapped leg. Then he stood, braced his shoulder against the boulder, and pushed. His boots dug into the dirt. The muscles in his neck corded. The boulder shifted an inch, then two. "Pull it out," he grunted. Isabella grabbed the calf under its chest and pulled. The animal thrashed, its hooves scraping against her arms. She pulled harder. The leg came free. Daniel stepped back, breathing hard. The calf scrambled upright, shaky but whole. It looked at them with wild eyes, then bolted up the slope and disappeared into the brush. "Its mother will find it." Daniel wiped his forehead with his sleeve. He looked at Isabella at the dirt on her dress, the scratches on her arms, the sweat streaking her face. Good ear. That was all. But something in his voice had changed. Something small. Something real. The weeks folded into each other. Isabella learned to mend fences, how to splice wire without cutting her hands, how to set posts deep enough that the cattle couldn't push them over. She learned to read the herd, which cows were about to calve, which steers looked poorly, which bulls needed watching. Her hands blistered. The blisters popped. The skin beneath hardened into calluses. She stopped noticing. Daniel began to talk. Not speeches, just fragments, offered between tasks like coins dropped into a well. "Orphan," he said one evening, coiling rope by the barn. "Don't remember my folks, raised by whoever would take me." He tossed the coiled rope onto a hook, picked up another length. "Started working ranches at 14. He paused, tested a frayed section with his fingers. "Learned most things the hard way. Got cheated plenty. Got kicked out of bunkhouses for talking back." Isabella sat on an overturned bucket, oiling a bridle. She didn't look up. She'd learned that he talked more when she wasn't watching. Saved for 15 years? He set down the rope, looked out at the darkening prairie. "Every penny. Bought this land because nobody else wanted it. Too dry," they said. "Too far from town." He shrugged. "I reckon dry suited me fine." Isabella listened. She didn't share her own past. Not yet. But she listened. And Daniel seemed to understand that this was enough. They developed routines. Coffee at dawn, he made it, left a cup on the table for her. Work until the sun got too high. A meal of jerked beef and hard biscuits in the shade. More work until dusk. Supper together in the cabin. The kerosene lamp casting long shadows. Then the porch. The fire. The stars. One evening, as the sun dropped below the ridge, Daniel stood from the fire and nodded toward the east. "Something to show you." Isabella followed him across the yard, past the corral, along a faint trail that wound through the scrub. The light faded from gold to purple to gray. Her legs ached from the day's work, but she didn't complain. The trail ended at a cluster of rocks. Water seeped from between them, pooling in a natural basin worn smooth by years of flow. Hidden spring, Daniel said. When the well runs dry, and it will come August, this is where you get water. Isabella knelt at the edge of the basin. The water was clear, cold, smelling faintly of minerals and earth. She cupped her hands and drank. The cold hit her throat like something she'd forgotten existed. She drank again. And then she laughed. The sound surprised her. It came from somewhere deep, somewhere she'd buried years ago. A real laugh. Full and strange, and hers. Daniel turned away. But not before she caught the corner of his mouth twitching upward. They walked back in silence. The first stars appeared. Somewhere in the scrub, a coyote yipped, and another answered from far away. At the cabin, Mrs. Harlan's dun mare was tied to the porch rail. The widow sat in the single rocking chair, a piece of paper in her hand. She looked up as they approached, her sharp eyes moving from Daniel to Isabella and back. Came to bring an invitation, she said. Church social next Saturday. Whole town'll be there. She held out the paper. Isabella took it. The ink was smudged, hand-printed. Figured you might want to meet folks proper, Mrs. Harlan continued. Her gaze settled on Isabella. Been 6 weeks now. People are curious. 6 weeks. Had it really been that long? Mrs. Harlan mounted her horse and rode off into the gathering dark. Isabella stood in the yard. The invitation crumpled in her fist. The whole town would be there. People who knew the Hawthorne name. People who might have heard why she was sent here. People who would look at her and see exactly what her father saw. The dress had taken 3 nights to mend. Isabella worked by lamplight each evening, squinting at the tiny stitches until her eyes burned. The hem had been too long, the waist too loose, the sleeves frayed at the cuffs. She'd taken it apart and put it back together, piece by piece, until it fit. Now she stood in the cabin, smoothing the fabric over her hips. The cotton was soft from washing, faded from blue to something closer to gray, but it was clean. It was hers. Outside. The buckboard wagon waited. Daniel had hitched it at dawn, then ridden out to check the cattle. He would meet her at the church, he said. She would drive herself. Isabella's hands trembled as she picked up the reins. The road to Stillwater wound through brown hills and dry creek beds. The wagon jolted over ruts and stones, each bump sending a jolt up Isabella's spine. By the time the church steeple appeared on the horizon, her shoulders ached from gripping the reins. The church was small, white-clapboard, a single bell tower, a yard of packed dirt where wagons and horses clustered. People milled about in the shade of a cottonwood tree. Tables had been set up, covered with checked cloths and laden with food. Isabella pulled the wagon to a stop at the edge of the yard. She sat for a moment, watching. Women in calico dresses, men in clean shirts, hats in hand. Children running between the tables, chasing each other with sticks. The smell of roasting meat and fresh bread drifted on the air. She climbed down. Her boots hit the dirt with a soft thud. Faces turned toward her. Some curious, some guarded. A few openly staring. Mrs. Harlan appeared at her elbow. You made it. Good. She took Isabella's arm and steered her toward the tables. Come. I'll introduce you to folks. The next hour passed in a blur of names and faces. Mrs. Patterson, the minister's wife, with her tight smile and watchful eyes. Mr. Hendricks, who ran the general store, nodding politely. Young Sarah Jennings, barely 16, who giggled behind her hand when Isabella walked past. Some people were kind. They asked about the homestead, about the cattle, about how she was settling in. Their voices were warm, their questions genuine. Others were not. Isabella stood near the lemonade table, a glass sweating in her hand. When she heard it, two women behind her, speaking in voices just loud enough to carry, "That's the Hawthorne girl, the one who got sent out here." Sent more like thrown away, I heard. Her father couldn't find anyone to marry her. Can you imagine all that money and still no takers? Well, look at her. Would you take her? Isabella's fingers tightened on the glass. The lemonade sloshed, spilling over her knuckles. She didn't turn around. She kept her eyes fixed on the tree line, on the brown hills beyond, on anything but the faces around her. And now she's living with Cole, alone. Unwed. Scandalous. Pitiful. More like... The glass slipped from Isabella's hand. It hit the ground and shattered. Lemonade spreading across the dirt. Everyone looked. Isabella dropped to her knees, gathering the broken pieces with shaking hands. A shard bit into her palm. Blood welled up, bright red against her skin. "Leave it." Mrs. Harlan was there, pulling her up. "Leave it, child. It's just glass." But it wasn't just glass. It was everything. The stares, the whispers, the knowledge that no matter how far she ran, her father's judgment would follow. A murmur ran through the crowd. Isabella looked up. Daniel rode into the yard on Crow. Dust coated his clothes. Sweat darkened the band of his hat. He swung down, tied the horse to a post, and walked straight toward her. The whispers stopped. He stopped beside her, looked at her bleeding hand, then looked at the faces watching them. "You hurt." "It's nothing." He pulled a bandana from his pocket and wrapped it around her palm. His hands were rough, efficient. He didn't look at the crowd. He didn't acknowledge them at all. A woman stepped forward. Mrs. Patterson, the minister's wife, her smile stretched thin. "Mr. Cole, so good of you to join us." Her eyes slid to Isabella. "And you are Mr. Cole's?" She let the question hang. Isabella's mouth opened. No words came. "She's with me." Daniel's voice was flat, final. Mrs. Patterson blinked. "With you, but I understood she was..." "With me." He didn't elaborate, didn't explain. He took Isabella's elbow and steered her away from the table, away from the staring faces, toward the shade of the cottonwood tree. They stood in silence. The fiddle started up behind them. Someone had brought instruments, and a few couples began to dance. Daniel didn't move toward the music. "You don't dance?" Isabella asked. Her voice came out smaller than she intended. "No." Never learned, never saw the point. He stood beside her for the rest of the afternoon. He didn't talk to anyone. He didn't eat. He didn't leave her side. When the sun began to drop toward the hills, he nodded toward the wagon. "Time to go." The ride home was quiet. The wagon creaked and swayed. The horses plodded along the rutted road. The sky turned from gold to orange to deep purple. Isabella held the bandana-wrapped hand in her lap. The bleeding had stopped, but the cut still throbbed. "They'll talk," Daniel said finally. His eyes stayed on the road. "I know. Let them." He shifted the reins. "Ain't none of their business what goes on at my place." Isabella looked at him. His profile was sharp against the fading light, the hard line of his jaw, the set of his shoulders, the stillness that seemed to go all the way down to his bones. "Why did you stand with me? You could have stayed back. Let them think whatever they wanted." Daniel was quiet for a long moment. The wagon wheels crunched over gravel. A nighthawk called somewhere in the scrub. "I reckon I know what it feels like," he said slowly. He paused, adjusted the reins again. "Being looked at like you don't belong, like you're something to be pitied." Another pause. "Spent most of my life with folks looking at me that way. Don't much care for seeing it done to someone else." The wagon creaked. The horses snorted. "That woman back there," Isabella said. "She asked what I was to you." "I heard." "What am I—" Daniel didn't answer right away. The question hung between them, filling the space where the silence had been. "You're someone who showed up at my door with nothing but a carpet bag and a letter full of lies." He glanced at her, then back at the road. "And you didn't give up. You learned to haul water, ride a horse, find a calf stuck in a ravine." He paused. "I reckon that makes you someone worth standing beside." They didn't speak again until they reached the homestead. Daniel unhitched the horses while Isabella walked to the porch. The stars were emerging now one by one, filling the sky with cold light. She sat in the rocking chair. Her hand ached. Her chest ached worse. Daniel finished with the horses and came to the porch. He didn't sit. He stood at the rail, looking out at the dark prairie. "Daniel." He turned. Isabella wanted to say something. Something about the way he had stood beside her when everyone else was watching. Something about the strange warmth growing in her chest, the feeling that maybe, for the first time in her life, someone saw her as she actually was. But the words tangled in her throat. "Thank you," she said instead. "For today." Daniel watched her for a long moment. Something moved behind his eyes, something she couldn't name. His hand lifted from the rail, moved toward her, then stopped. "Get some sleep," he said quietly. "Morning comes early." He walked toward the barn, stopped at the door, looked back once. Then he was gone, swallowed by the darkness inside. Isabella sat alone on the porch. The stars pressed down. The wind carried the smell of sage and dust and wood smoke. She looked toward the barn. A faint glow flickered through the gaps in the boards. He had lit a lantern for himself. Out there, alone. And suddenly she understood something she hadn't before. Daniel Cole wasn't just giving her shelter. He wasn't just teaching her to survive. He was waiting, patiently, quietly. The way he had taught her to wait for Bess to take the apple from her hand. He was waiting for her to choose. But choose what? Choose to stay? Choose him. And would she ever be brave enough to do it? The question circled in her mind, finding no answers. And from somewhere far down the road, she heard hoofbeats. coming fast. The rider came out of the darkness at a hard gallop. Isabella stood from the rocking chair. Her heart hammered against her ribs. Daniel emerged from the barn, silhouetted against the lantern light behind him. The horse skidded to a stop in the yard. A young man barely 20, thin as a fence post, swung down and held up a leather satchel. "Mail run from Stillwater," he said, breathing hard. "Got a letter for this address. Marked urgent." Daniel walked forward, took the letter. The young man mounted again, touched his hat, and rode off into the night without another word. Isabella's legs carried her across the yard before she knew she was moving. Daniel stood in the center of the packed dirt, turning the envelope over in his hands. Even in the dim light, she recognized the seal, red wax, the hawthorn crest, a hawk clutching an oak branch. Her father. Daniel held out the letter. His face was unreadable. Isabella took it. The paper was heavy, expensive, parchment, not common stock. Her father never sent anything less. "I'll be in the barn," Daniel said. He walked away without looking back. Isabella stood alone in the yard. The stars pressed down. The wind carried the smell of sage and horse and something sharp, the taste of metal on her tongue. She walked to the porch, sat in the rocking chair, held the letter in both hands. The seal stared up at her. That hawk, that oak branch, the motto beneath. Too small to read in the darkness, but burned into her memory from childhood. Strength through propriety. Her fingers found the edge of the wax. Hesitated. Whatever was inside this envelope would change everything. She knew it, the way she knew the sun would rise tomorrow. She broke the seal. The letter was 2 pages. Her father's handwriting sharp, angular, impatient, covered both sides. "Isabella, I trust this letter finds you in adequate health. I have allowed sufficient time for you to reflect upon your circumstances and recognize the generosity of my forbearance. I write to inform you that I have secured a suitable match. Mr. Edmund Aldridge, a widower of considerable means, has expressed interest in taking you as his wife. He is aware of your situation and has graciously agreed to overlook your deficiencies in exchange for the Hawthorne connection. I will arrive on August 15th to collect you. Prepare yourself accordingly. This arrangement restores your position in society. You have been humbled sufficiently. It is time to return and fulfill your obligations to this family. Your father, William Hawthorne." Isabella read the letter twice, 3 times. The words blurred and sharpened. Deficiencies, humbled sufficiently, collect you. She folded the paper carefully, set it on her knee, looked out at the dark prairie. August 15th, 2 weeks away. 2 weeks! And her father would arrive in his fine carriage with his silver-handled cane and his cold eyes. He would look at this cabin, this land, this life she had built with her own calloused hands, and he would see nothing worth keeping. And Mr. Aldridge? She didn't know him, had never heard his name before tonight, but she knew exactly what he was. A man willing to take damaged goods in exchange for a family name. A man who would overlook her deficiencies. The word sat in her chest like a stone. Deficiencies. Her size, her stubbornness, her refusal to become what they wanted her to be. The same things that had made her worthless to every suitor in Boston. The same things that had made her father send her here like a piece of furniture he no longer wanted. Isabella stood. Her legs felt wooden, disconnected from her body. She walked into the cabin and stood before the cast-iron stove. The embers glowed orange through the grate, pulsing like a heartbeat. She held the letter over the opening. The heat licked at the paper's edge. 1 second. 2. The parchment began to curl, browning at the corner. She pulled it back. Not yet. Not like this. If she burned the letter, she was hiding, running, making the choice out of panic rather than conviction. She needed to face this with her eyes open. She needed to know exactly what she was choosing and why. Isabella tucked the letter into her dress pocket and walked back outside. Daniel sat on an overturned bucket near the barn, whittling a piece of wood by lantern light. The knife moved in small, precise strokes. Curls of wood fell to the dirt at his feet. He didn't look up when she approached. Isabella sat on the ground across from him. The lantern flickered between them. She pulled the letter from her pocket and held it out. Daniel set down the knife, took the letter, read it slowly, his lips moving slightly over the words. When he finished, he folded it and handed it back. "He found someone," Isabella said. Her voice sounded flat, like it belonged to someone else. "A widower. Wealthy." Daniel picked up his knife, resumed whittling. "So you'll go?" It wasn't a question. It wasn't an accusation. It was nothing at all, just words, empty of everything she needed to hear. "You want me to go?" The knife stopped. Daniel looked up. His eyes caught the lantern light, and something moved in them, something raw and unguarded. "What I want don't matter," he said quietly. "This is your life, your choice." Isabella stared at him. The lantern hissed softly. Somewhere in the scrub, a nightbird called. "No one's ever said that to me before." "Said what?" "That it's my life, that what I want matters." Daniel's jaw tightened. He looked back down at the wood in his hands. "Well, now you've heard it." The silence stretched between them. The flame in the lantern guttered, then steadied. An owl called somewhere beyond the corral. "He arrives in 2 weeks," Isabella said. "August 15th? Daniel nodded. Still didn't look up. "He'll bring Mr. Aldridge. They'll expect me to leave with them." Another nod. "What should I do?" Now Daniel looked up. The lantern light carved deep shadows into his face, making him look older, harder. "That ain't my question to answer." "I'm asking anyway." He set down the knife in the wood, leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. When he spoke, his voice was low and rough. "I grew up with nothing. No family, no name, no place that was mine." He paused, picked at a splinter on his thumb. "Spent 15 years working other men's land, sleeping in other men's barns, eating what they chose to give me." Another pause. "Then I saved enough to buy this place. 40 acres of dirt nobody wanted. And the first night I slept here, in that cabin, I understood something." Isabella waited. "It ain't about the land." Daniel looked up, his eyes steady. "It ain't about the money or the house or any of it. It's about choosing, deciding for yourself what your life means." He paused. "Nobody can give you that, nobody can take it away. You either claim it or you don't." He stood, brushed wood shavings from his trousers. "Your father's coming. This Aldridge fellow is coming. They'll tell you what your life should be. They'll tell you what you're worth." He looked down at her, and his eyes were steady as the earth beneath them. "But they don't get to decide. Only you do." He walked toward the barn, stopped at the door. "Get some sleep. Morning comes early." Then he was gone, swallowed by the darkness inside. Isabella sat by the dying lantern. The letter crinkled in her pocket as she shifted. The stars wheeled overhead, indifferent and cold. 2 weeks. 2 weeks to decide what her life meant. 2 weeks to figure out what she wanted, truly wanted, not what she'd been told to want. She pulled the letter out again, looked at her father's handwriting. Those sharp, angular strokes that had signed her away like a bill of sale. "You have been humbled sufficiently." She thought about the blisters on her hands, the mornings at the well, the calf she had found in the ravine, the way Bess had taken the apple from her palm. She thought about Daniel standing beside her at the church social, saying 3 words that had silenced a crowd. "She's with me." Isabella folded the letter and put it back in her pocket. She stood, brushed dirt from her dress, and walked toward the cabin. The night pressed close around her. The wind carried the smell of smoke and sage. In 2 weeks, her father would come to take her back to the life she had always known, the life of parlors and silences and shame. But somewhere between the well and the corral and the hidden spring, Isabella had become someone different, someone who could haul water and ride a horse and pull a calf from a ravine, someone who had never been asked what she wanted until tonight. The question Daniel had asked echoed in her mind, unanswered and urgent. What do you want? She didn't know yet. But she had 2 weeks to find out. And somewhere deep in her chest, beneath the fear and the doubt, something small and stubborn was beginning to grow. Sleep would not come. Isabella lay on the rope bed, staring at the darkness above her, the quilt tangled around her legs, damp with sweat, despite the cool night air. The oilcloth window let in a thin stripe of moonlight that fell across the packed dirt floor, like a scar. Her father's letter sat on the table. She had read it 8 times since sunset. Each time, the words cut deeper. Deficiencies, humbled sufficiently, collect you. She closed her eyes. The darkness behind her lids was worse, full of faces, voices, memories she had spent years trying to bury. Her mother's funeral. Isabella had been 12. She remembered the black dress that didn't fit properly, the way it pulled across her chest and hips, while other girls her age wore theirs loose. She remembered her father's hand on her shoulder the last time he ever touched her, and his voice, low and cold, stand straight. People are watching. People were always watching. The years that followed blurred together. Silent meals in the dining room. Her father at one end of the long table, Isabella at the other. The tutors who came and went, hired to teach her deportment, dancing, French. The disappointed sighs when she couldn't master the steps. The measuring tapes that grew longer each year. The dressmakers who pursed their lips and asked for more fabric. And the suitors. Isabella's eyes snapped open. She sat up, throwing off the quilt. The cabin walls pressed in on her. Too close, too small. She pulled on her boots and stumbled outside. The night air hit her face like cold water. The stars blazed overhead. Thousands of them. More than she could count. The prairie stretched in every direction. silver gray under the moon. She started walking. Her boots crunched on dry grass. She didn't know where she was going. She just needed to move, to escape the cabin and the letter and the voices in her head. No decent man would have you. Her father's words, but also the words of every aunt, every cousin, every society matron who had looked at her and seen only what she lacked. Such a shame about the Hawthorne girl. Her mother was so lovely. Have you tried the new corsets from Paris? They work wonders, I'm told. Perhaps if she ate less at supper. Men notice these things. Isabella walked faster. The grass whipped against her nightdress. Her breath came in sharp gasps. She remembered the last suitor, Mr. Whitmore, 53 years old, recently widowed, looking for a young wife to manage his household. Her father had arranged a dinner. Isabella had worn her best dress, dark blue silk, let out twice at the seams. Mr. Whitmore had looked at her across the table. His eyes had traveled from her face to her chest to her waist, and something had shifted in his expression. Disappointment, calculation, resignation. After dinner, she had stood outside her father's study, listening through the crack in the door. She's larger than I expected. Something like that. The shape of his words burned into her memory, if not the exact phrasing. She photographs well. The camera is forgiving? Indeed. But I'm not marrying a photograph. Am I? They had laughed. Both of them. Her father and the man who was supposed to want her. Isabella's foot caught on a root. She stumbled, pitched forward, and fell, and fell. The ground was soft here, too soft. Her hands sank into cold mud up to her wrists. Her knees hit with a wet squelch. The smell rose up around her: rot, stagnant water, decay. A dry creek bed that had pooled after the last rain, hidden in the darkness. She tried to push herself up. Her hand slipped. She went down again. Face first this time, mud splashing across her cheek, into her hair, filling her mouth with the taste of earth and something foul. For a moment, she didn't move. She lay in the mud, her nightdress soaking through, her hands buried in the muck, and she thought, this is where I belong. This is what I am. The voices came louder now. Burden, disgrace, deficiency. No decent man would have you, collect you. Like furniture, like garbage to be hauled away. Tears burned her eyes. She pressed her forehead into the mud and let them come ugly, gasping sobs that shook her whole body. Snot ran down her lip. Mud caked in her hair. She didn't care. She was beyond caring. 24 years. 24 years of trying to be smaller, quieter, less. 24 years of watching her father's face close like a door every time he looked at her. 24 years of believing that if she could just be different, thinner, prettier, more docile, maybe someone would want her. And now this. Face down in a mud hole in the middle of nowhere. Alone. Unwanted. Waiting to be collected like a stray dog that had wandered too far from home. Isabella's fingers curled into the mud. Her nails scraped against something hard, a rock. Maybe, or a root. She gripped it. Held on. And somewhere, deep in the wreckage of her chest, something moved. Not hope, not yet. Something smaller, something harder. Anger. She pushed herself up. Her arms shook. Mud dripped from her chin, her chest, her hands. She got one knee under her, then the other. Stood. Swayed. Stood again. Her nightdress clung to her body. heavy with water and filth. She looked down at herself and saw exactly what her father had always seen: a mess, a problem. But she was standing. She was standing. And she had gotten up by herself. And no one had helped her. Isabella wiped her face with the back of her hand. The mud smeared, but didn't come off. She didn't care. She turned east, toward the ridge where she knew the hidden spring waited. Her legs moved without thought, carrying her across the prairie, through the silver grass, past the scattered mesquite. The spring appeared in the darkness, a gleam of water between rocks, catching the moonlight. Isabella knelt at its edge. The water was cold, shockingly cold. As she plunged her hands in and scrubbed the mud from her skin, she washed her face, her neck, her arms. The water ran brown, then gray, then clear. When she was done, she sat back on her heels and looked down at her reflection. The woman in the water was not beautiful. Her face was red and blotchy from crying. Her hair hung in wet tangles around her shoulders. Mud still clung to the edges of her hairline, dark against her pale skin. But her eyes were steady. Her jaw was set. Her hands rough with calluses, nicked with small scars from wire and wood and work. Those were not the hands of a burden. Those were the hands of someone who had learned to haul water and mend fences and find lost calves in ravines. Isabella stood. Her legs were steady now. The walk back to the cabin took 20 minutes. The sky was lightening in the east when she crested the last ridge and saw the homestead below. Daniel sat on the porch. He held a tin cup in his hands, steam rising from it. He didn't say anything when she walked into the yard. His eyes moved over her, the mud-stained nightdress, the wet hair, the raw hands, and something flickered in his face. He stood, went into the cabin, came back with another cup, held it out to her. Coffee. Hot. The smell of it cut through the lingering taste of mud in her mouth. Isabella took the cup. Their fingers brushed. "Where'd you go?" Daniel asked. "To find something." "Did you find it?" Isabella looked at him. At the homestead. At the endless brown prairie and the huge blue sky turning pink with dawn. "I think so." Daniel nodded. Sat back down. Isabella sat beside him. The coffee warmed her hands. The sun crept over the horizon, painting the sky gold. Neither of them spoke. They didn't need to. But as the light grew stronger, Isabella saw something she hadn't noticed before. A second rocking chair sat beside Daniel's new wood, freshly sanded, the joints still pale and unweathered. He had built it recently, very recently. "When did you make that?" she asked. Daniel looked at the chair, then looked away. "Last week, when the letter came. Before you knew what I would choose." He didn't answer. He didn't need to. The sun rose higher. The coffee cooled in her hands, and somewhere on the road from the east, her father's carriage was already moving. The carriage appeared at noon. Isabella saw at first a dark shape moving along the ridge, trailing a plume of dust. Too fine for a freight wagon, too large for a single rider. The brass fittings caught the sun and flashed like signals. Her hands stopped moving over the fence wire. The pliers hung loose in her grip. Daniel straightened beside her. He followed her gaze, said nothing. The carriage descended the slope slowly, its wheels finding every rut in the road. Matched bay horses pulled it forward, their coats gleaming, their harnesses polished to a high shine. The driver sat rigid on the box, dressed in livery that looked absurd against the brown prairie. Isabella set down the pliers, wiped her hands on her work dress, the same faded cotton she had mended for the church social. Dust streaked the fabric. Sweat stained the collar. The carriage stopped in the yard. The driver climbed down and opened the door. A silver-handled cane emerged first, tapping against the step. Then a polished boot. Then the rest of William Hawthorne, tall, thin. His gray hair swept back from a face that had grown harder since Isabella had seen it last. He stepped onto the dirt and looked around. His eyes moved over the sod-roofed cabin, the split-rail corral, the weathered barn with its crooked door. His lip curled. A second man climbed out behind him, younger perhaps 45, with soft hands and a tailored suit that had no place on a cattle homestead. His face was pleasant in the way of men who had never been refused anything. He smiled when he saw Isabella. Mr. Edmund Aldridge. The solution to her father's problem. Isabella walked toward them. Her boots crunched on the packed dirt. Daniel followed 3 steps behind, his presence steady at her back. "Father?" Her voice came out even. She was surprised by that. William Hawthorne did not embrace her, did not smile. His eyes swept over her from head to foot, the sunburned face, the calloused hands, the work dress stained with dirt and sweat. "You look like a farmhand." "I've been working." "Clearly." He turned to Aldridge. "You see what I mean? She's been reduced to this." Aldridge's smile didn't waver. He stepped forward, extending his hand. "Miss Hawthorne, a pleasure to finally meet you. Your father has told me a great deal." Isabella looked at his hand, didn't take it. Aldridge lowered his arm. The smile remained, but something flickered behind his eyes. Calculation. Reassessment. "We've come to bring you home," her father said. "The carriage is comfortable. We can be in Stillwater by nightfall and on the train east by morning." "No." The word dropped between them like a stone into still water. William Hawthorne blinked. "I beg your pardon. I said no." Isabella's hands hung at her sides. She could feel Daniel behind her, silent, waiting. But this wasn't his fight. It had never been his fight. "I'm not going with you?" Her father's jaw tightened. "Isabella, we discussed this in the letter." "You didn't discuss anything. You informed me, the way you've always informed me. Every decision about my life since I was 12 years old. Because you were incapable of making decisions for yourself." His voice rose slightly. "You still are, evidently." He gestured at the homestead, the cabin, the barn, the endless brown prairie. "Look at this place. Look at what you've become. Living in filth with a man who has nothing, doing manual labor like a common servant. This is what you choose. Yes. You've lost your mind." "No." Isabella stepped forward. Her father was taller than her, but she didn't look away. "For the first time in my life, I think I've found it." Aldridge cleared his throat. His voice was smooth, practiced. "Miss Hawthorne, I understand this life must have a certain rustic charm, but surely you see that it's no place for a woman of your breeding. Your father has made generous arrangements. A fine home, a comfortable income, security." He paused. "All I ask in return is companionship." Isabella turned to look at him. Really look. His suit was immaculate, his face pleasant, his hands soft as a child's. He had never hauled water from a well, never mended a fence, never found a calf trapped in a ravine and pulled it free with his own 2 hands. He didn't see her. He saw a problem to be solved, a name to be acquired, a transaction to be completed. Mr. Aldridge? Isabella's voice was steady. I don't know you. You don't know me. You know only what my father has told you, that I am difficult, that I am too large, that no decent man would have me. She paused. Is that what you want, a wife who comes to you because no one else would take her? Aldridge's smile faltered. I wouldn't put it quite that way. How would you put it? He didn't answer. Isabella turned back to her father. Her heart was pounding now, but her voice stayed even. You called me trouble. You wrote it in your letter to Daniel. You said I was stubborn, willful, a burden. I was trying to be honest about your situation. You were trying to get rid of me? Her voice cracked. She pushed through it. The way you've been trying to get rid of me since Mother died? Something shifted in her father's face. A flicker, gone as quickly as it appeared. You couldn't stand looking at me, Isabella continued. Couldn't stand being reminded that she was gone and I was still here. So you hid me away, sent me to tutors, paraded me in front of suitors who looked at me like... She stopped, swallowed. Like livestock at auction? That's not... It is... Her hands were shaking now, but she didn't hide them. It's exactly what happened. And when none of them wanted me, you threw me away, sent me here like damaged goods being returned to the warehouse. Her father's face had gone red. The silver-handled cane trembled in his grip. I gave you everything, he said, his voice was tight, controlled. Education, society, opportunity. You gave me shame. Isabella's voice rose. Every day, every meal, every time you looked at me and then looked away, you taught me that I was worthless, that my body was wrong, that I would never be enough. The words hung in the air. The horses shifted in their traces. The driver stared straight ahead, pretending not to hear. And then I came here, Isabella continued. To this place you called nothing. To this man you dismissed as poor and beneath us. She held up her palms, rough, calloused, scarred. These hands have done more in 2 months than they did in 24 years under your roof. And for the first time in my life, someone looked at me and saw a person. Not a problem, not a burden, a person. She turned to Daniel. He stood by the corral fence, arms crossed, face unreadable. He hadn't moved, hadn't spoken. He was letting her fight her own battle. You have nothing to say. Her father's voice dripped contempt. You've corrupted my daughter, and you stand there in silence. Daniel looked at him, then at Isabella, then back at her father. Ain't my decision, he said quietly. It's hers. She's a fool. She doesn't know what she's choosing. She knows exactly what she's choosing. Daniel's voice was flat, final. That's what scares you. William Hawthorne's face contorted. He took a step toward Daniel. Cane raised, Father. Isabella moved between them. Don't. The cane hovered in the air. Her father's hand shook. His breath came fast and harsh. And then something cracked in his face. Just for a moment. Just beneath the anger. He looked at his daughter, really looked. And Isabella saw it. The thing he had buried for 12 years. The grief, the guilt, the knowledge that he had failed her mother, failed himself. The cane lowered. "You're making a mistake," he said, but the venom was gone from his voice. He sounded tired, old. Maybe. Isabella didn't step back. "But it's my mistake to make." Her father stared at her for a long moment. The prairie wind gusted, carrying dust and the smell of sage. Aldridge shifted uncomfortably, his pleasant mask slipping. "We should go, William," Aldridge said quietly. Clearly this was premature. Her father didn't respond. He kept looking at Isabella. And something moved in his eyes, some remnant of the man he had been before grief had hollowed him out. "You look like her," he said finally. His voice cracked on the words. "Your mother. When she was young. Before she got sick." Isabella's breath caught. He had never said that before. Not once in 12 years. Her father turned away before she could respond. He walked back to the carriage and climbed inside without looking back. Aldridge hesitated. Opened his mouth as if to speak. Thought better of it. He tipped his hat a reflexive gesture, meaningless, and followed. The driver climbed onto the box. The horses stamped. The carriage turned, slowly, its wheels cutting fresh ruts in the dirt. Isabella watched it go. She watched until it crested the ridge and disappeared, until the dust settled and the prairie was silent again. Her legs gave out. She sat down hard in the dirt, right there in the middle of the yard. Her hands were shaking. Her whole body was shaking. Daniel walked over. He didn't offer his hand. He sat down beside her, his shoulder almost touching hers. They sat in the dirt together, watching the empty road. "He loved her," Isabella said. Her voice sounded strange, hollow. "My mother. He loved her so much that when she died, he couldn't bear to look at me, because I reminded him of what he'd lost." Daniel didn't say anything. "It doesn't excuse what he did, but I think I understand now." She paused. "He wasn't just punishing me. He was punishing himself." The wind gusted. Dust swirled around them. "What happens now?" Daniel asked. Isabella looked at him, at the homestead, at the endless brown prairie and the huge blue sky. "I don't know," she said. "I've never gotten to decide that before." Daniel nodded, stood, held out his hand. She took it. The dust settled slowly. Isabella stood in the yard, Daniel's hand still warm in hers. The road stretched empty toward the distant ridge. No sign of the carriage, no sound of wheels or hooves, just the wind moving through the dry grass and the steady creak of the barn door swinging on its hinges. She let go of his hand, brushed dirt from her dress. Her legs felt strange light, unmoored, as if the weight she had carried for 24 years had finally lifted and she didn't know how to stand without it. "He'll tell everyone," she said. Her voice came out rough. "That I've gone mad, that I chose a dirt farmer over a wealthy widower. The whole county will hear about it by next week." Daniel walked toward the well, lowered the bucket. The crank squealed. "Let him. Ain't none of their concern what happens here." Isabella watched him haul up the water. His shoulders moved under his worn shirt. Steady, unhurried. He carried the bucket to the horses, let them drink, carried it back. "You don't care what people say." He set the bucket down, looked at her. I stopped caring what people say when I was 14 years old. He wiped his hands on his trousers. A man I worked for told me I'd never amount to anything. Said I was born worthless, and I'd die worthless. He shrugged. I decided he was wrong. Took me 15 years to prove it, but here I am. He nodded toward the homestead, the cabin, the barn, the 40 acres of dry grass and stubborn cattle. This ain't much by most measures, but it's mine. I built it. Nobody gave it to me, and nobody can take it away. Isabella looked at the cabin, the sod roof that blended into the brown prairie, the porch with its rough-hewn planks, the 2 rocking chairs sitting side by side. "When did you make that chair?" she asked again. She had asked this morning, but he hadn't really answered. Daniel picked up the bucket, started toward the barn. "Last week," he said over his shoulder. "When the letter came. Now before you knew what I would choose." He stopped, turned. "I didn't know," he said. "But I hoped." He walked into the barn, and Isabella stood alone in the yard. The sun was past its peak now, sliding toward the western hills. The shadows lengthened across the dirt. He hoped. The word sat in her chest, warm and strange. Nobody had ever hoped for her before. Not like this. Not quietly, without expectation or demand. The afternoon passed in work. Isabella mended the fence they had abandoned when the carriage arrived. Daniel rode out to check the cattle. The sun moved across the sky, and the prairie shifted from gold to amber to the deep orange, approaching dusk. She finished the last splice as Daniel rode back into the yard. He unsaddled Crow, brushed him down, led him to the corral. The routine was familiar now, so familiar that Isabella could predict each movement before it happened. "I'll cook," she said. Daniel nodded. Walked toward the barn to hang the tack. Isabella went inside. The cabin smelled of wood smoke and coffee, and something else, a faint sweetness, like dried sage. She lit the kerosene lamp and set it on the table. The flame caught, steadied, cast long shadows on the walls. She had learned to cook over the past 2 months. Not well. At first there had been burned cornbread and oversalted beans, and stew that tasted like boot leather. But she had kept trying. Tonight she made what she knew: beans with salt pork, cornbread in the cast-iron skillet, coffee strong enough to stand a spoon in. Simple food, honest food. Daniel came in as she was setting the table. He had washed at the pump. His hair was damp, slicked back from his forehead. He sat in his usual chair, the one with the worn armrest, and waited. Isabella served the beans, cut the cornbread, poured the coffee. They ate in silence. The lamp flickered. Outside, the first stars began to appear. "This is good," Daniel said. Isabella looked up. He was looking at his plate, not at her. But there was something in his voice she hadn't heard before. Something soft. The cornbread. All of it. She didn't know what to say. She took another bite of beans and chewed slowly, tasting the salt and the smoke and the faint sweetness of the pork. When the meal was done, Daniel carried the plates to the basin. Isabella washed them, another skill she had learned, scrubbing with sand and lye soap until the tin gleamed. He dried them with a cloth and stacked them on the shelf. They moved around each other easily, without collision, like 2 people who had done this 1,000 times before. "Porch?" Daniel asked. Isabella nodded. The rocking chairs sat side by side, facing the western hills. The new one was on the left. Daniel had placed it there, close enough that their armrests almost touched. Isabella sat. The wood was smooth under her hands, sanded to a fine finish. Daniel must have worked on it for days, shaping the slats, joining the pieces, finishing the grain. He sat beside her. The chairs creaked in unison as they rocked. The sky deepened from orange to purple to the deep blue of early night. The first stars appeared faint at first, then brighter, then countless. The Milky Way stretched across the darkness like a river of light. "Will you stay?" Daniel's voice was quiet, not demanding, not pleading, just asking. Isabella looked at him. His profile was sharp against the fading light, the hard line of his jaw, the weathered skin, the steady eyes that had seen her from the first day and never looked away. "I already chose," she said. He nodded, rocked slowly, didn't speak. The silence stretched between them. But it wasn't empty. It was full of everything they had shared over the past 2 months, everything they had built together without naming it. "I don't know what happens next," Isabella said. "I've never gotten to decide that before. My father decided. Society decided. Everyone but me." Daniel rocked. The chair creaked. "What do you want?" Isabella thought about it. Really thought. Not what she should want, or what was proper, or what people expected. What did she actually want? "I want to stay here," she said slowly. "I want to learn more about the cattle, about the land. I want to ride Bess until I don't have to think about it anymore." She paused. "I want to sit on this porch and watch the stars come out, every night, for as long as I can." "That's a start. Is it enough?" Daniel turned to look at her. In the darkness, she couldn't see his expression, but she could feel it, the weight of his attention, steady and sure. "It's enough for now." He reached across the space between the chairs. His hand found hers on the armrest. His fingers were rough, calloused, warm. He didn't squeeze, didn't grip, just held. Isabella didn't pull away. They sat like that as the stars wheeled overhead, as the coyotes began to call in the distant scrub, as the night deepened and the air cooled and the prairie settled into silence. "Daniel?" Thank you." "For what?" Isabella thought about the letter her father had written. The words that had condemned her trouble, stubborn, willful, burden. The words Daniel had read and understood differently. For seeing something worth keeping. Daniel's hand tightened on hers. Just once, just briefly. Then relaxed again. "I didn't see anything that wasn't already there," he said. "You just needed someone to point it out." The stars blazed overhead. More stars than Isabella had ever seen in Boston, more than she had known existed. They stretched from horizon to horizon, filling the sky with cold light. But she wasn't cold. The chair was solid beneath her. Daniel's hand was warm in hers. The cabin waited behind them, small and sturdy, a home built from nothing by a man who had been told he would never amount to anything. She thought about her father's face when he had looked at her for the last time, the crack in his armor, the grief he had buried for 12 years, rising to the surface despite everything. She thought about her mother, dead since Isabella was 12. The beautiful woman everyone remembered. the absence that had shaped everything after. She thought about herself, the girl who had believed she was worthless, the woman who had crawled out of a mud hole in the middle of the night and stood up on her own 2 feet. I am not what he made me. The wind picked up, carrying the smell of sage and dry grass and something else, rain, maybe. Far to the west, the season was turning. Autumn would come soon, then winter. The land would change, and they would change with it. Daniel. I'm going to stay. He didn't say anything, but his thumb moved across her knuckles, slow and gentle. And she knew he had heard her. She knew he understood. The stars burned overhead. The chairs creaked in rhythm. 2 people sat on a porch in the middle of nowhere, holding hands in the darkness, watching the night unfold. Tomorrow there would be work fences to mend, cattle to check, water to haul. Tomorrow there would be meals to cook and horses to tend and all the small tasks that made up a life on the prairie. But tonight, there was only this: the stars, the silence, the warmth of another person's hand. Isabella closed her eyes and breathed in the night air, sage and dust and wood smoke. The smell of the home she had chosen. The home that had chosen her back. There's a certain quiet that settles in after a story like this one. A tender kind of stillness that sits somewhere in the chest and asks for nothing in return. Perhaps you know it. Many of us have stood where Isabella stood, not on a prairie, maybe, but in some place just as vast, a place where the people who were supposed to see us looked right through. A place where we wondered, quietly and for too long, if we were worth the trouble of keeping. Some of us are still standing there, and if that's you tonight, I want you to know it's all right if the ache hasn't gone away. It's all right if this story stirred something you thought you'd buried years ago. These things don't need to be resolved. They're allowed to simply rest. The way the prairie rests under all those stars holding everything, explaining nothing. Not every wound closes cleanly. Not every question finds its answer. But sometimes, just sometimes, another person's story reminds us that we were never as alone as we felt. Thank you for staying until the end. Thank you for listening.